Hello, and welcome to Research the News. This week, we're talking about Venezuela, the birthplace of Simón Bolívar, the liberator of South America. It is home to the world's highest waterfall, some of the best chocolate in the world, and a place where gasoline costs 8 US cents per gallon. In the 1970s, Venezuela had the highest growth rate and lowest inequality in Latin America. But since 2014, it's been home to the second largest refugee crisis in the world, next to Syria. Now, most of us know about what's happening in Syria. Because of their civil war, they have had 6.6 million refugees and have received $20.8 billion in aid since 2011. And the US has contributed more than $12 billion of that. But in comparison, Venezuela has had 5.4 million refugees, which is only about 1 million less than Syria, but has only received $1.4 billion in aid, which is 6.7% of the amount given to Syria. And that's only since 2015, so 4 less years. The population of Venezuela before the exodus was 30 million people. So that means that 18% of the population have left their country, their homes, and their family. This is in a country that has the largest oil reserves of any country in the world and is ranked 12th in highest freshwater resources. But now, a single bottle of water costs nearly 40% of the monthly minimum wage. Less than 20% of factories are still in operation, passports can be confiscated at will, citizens can only withdraw what equates to 50 US cents per week from their bank accounts. And most importantly, 96% of Venezuelans live in poverty, and 70% live in extreme poverty. This became personal to me when I met a friend who came to America from Venezuela in order to escape the conditions there, but more importantly for her, to support her family back home. She brought her cousins to America as well and provided them with a place to live, all while sending money back to her family in Caracas so that they would be able to survive. And not only that, but one day, I saw a scar on her leg, and I asked what it was from. She calmly told me that she was at a protest that was organized against the disputed president Nicolas Maduro when police opened fire on the crowd. She dove behind a car, but was hit with a bullet in her leg. And at that moment, I realized that she was way more badass than I would ever be. And today, we're talking with another friend of mine who left Venezuela in 2015 to come to America as a political asylum seeker. His name is Gonzalo Veloz, and we're going to hear his experience on the turmoil in Venezuela as we try to figure out what happened. This is Research the News. All right, welcome to both of you.
Hi.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being
It's very
on.
exciting.
And yeah, I'm looking forward to the conversation. And yeah, everyone I think knows Gretchen at this point. Most of the people listening will not know Gonzalo, but I would like to say that whether we always talk about if you don't agree with what we're saying, keep listening because you'll understand what we're talking about. With Gonzalo, I feel like whether you're liberal or conservative, you may feel a little bit uncomfortable with what he has to say because one of the things I love about him is that he doesn't pull punches. But I think it's a great firsthand experience, and I hope that if you disagree with what any of us are saying, you keep listening so you can understand where we're all coming from. And as always, we're live, so there'll be no edits to the podcast. We just want to have a free-flowing conversation here. And we're going to start out by talking about, as we always do, some of our biases when it comes to this topic of Venezuela and the politics and life in Venezuela. So, Gonzalo, I think since you're the guest and by far know way more about Venezuela than both of us, do you want to talk a little bit about your biases and your experience?
Sure. So yeah, the situation of Venezuela, a lot of people in the outside world understand the crisis and has seen the crisis and think of the crisis started in the early 2010s. But beyond that, the crisis really started in 1998 when Hugo Chavez got into power. After 2 coup attempts, then he finally got power through elections. And then from there, it's been 20 plus years of this crazy roller coaster of all sorts, of a lot of antagonizing the the U.S. and a lot of oil and a lot of money and a lot of crazy stories and a lot of surreal things that has brought us to this moment that we're in the present day, right? The probably the second biggest refugee crisis in the world, that it's not gonna stop. The most underfunded refugee crisis in the world. One of the most dangerous countries in the world, one of the highest inflation rate in the planet, probably, and the list goes on and on and on. So yeah, I was born and raised. I grew up, spent all my childhood, all my teenage years there, and then I moved here in 2015 because of the situation, and seeing the everything from far away has been very eye-opening, because you get to see a lot of things from a comfortable point of view, and you get to analyze things with a bit more like thought and less emotion. And and Venezuela has also, with everything that has happened here in the past 4 years and the polarization in the politics and all that, has become a topic of conversation from both sides of the political spectrum here and in the world. So I think it's really important that and I appreciate that we're having this conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate you being on. And I think for people who are unaware, you said you think it's the highest inflation rate. It's insane, man. I think the last I saw it was 200,000% in the past. I mean,
it's crazy.
The US, for example, I think in the 70s we had like 12% inflation, and that's what got Jimmy Carter out of office, and the US was going crazy. But there's actually a new dollar they issued with 5 less zeros, because money is just basically worthless.
Yeah, there's been all sorts of adding zeros and taking zeros throughout the years.
Yeah.
There's always new bills, I honestly, at this point, I can't keep up with the economy. When somebody tells me how much something is, I don't understand, because it's been over 6 years. So the economy has changed so much that I have no way to get how really what prices are for stuff.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I think that's going into some of my biases. I think in general, I do have friends that are from Venezuela, and I've heard a lot from them about the situation, and I've tried for a while now to learn about what's happening. But I also am someone who is a free market person, and I am scared of socialism and communism. When I say scared, it's I think that there are often good intentions. I don't think people who want to have socialist societies have bad intentions and want people to suffer, but I think that when you look through history, it's not been something that's been executed well at all in many situations. And so my bias is against socialism, and I think that's something that we're going to talk about today a little bit, and that's just kind of where I lean towards. And Gretchen, you want to talk a little bit about your biases in relation to politics or Venezuela?
Yeah, I have a few acquaintances from Venezuela, but I don't have any friends, people that I talk to on a regular basis. So I'm actually really just interested to learn about your views about Venezuela, what's happening there, what you've gone through, and then how you view our country, collective, what it's like here versus there, and if there are any concerns that you have here. I'm very liberal, so I like the idea of social programs and what they can do to help people. I am not in favor of socialism. I don't think it has worked. And I think that it's when you look at socialism, it can go into communism. So then that worries me, where the government can actually take more than what it should and have a lot more say in what it should. So that's kind of where I lean.
I think in terms of my biases, I think a few years ago when I just moved here, I would have said, yeah, my biases are against the left and all these things. But now, after living here for so many years, I think my biases are more against interpretation of politics. Because when you see I think the polarization here of the United States is a great example of the polarization of the rest of the world. Yeah. Right? Mm-hmm. You have right wing that it's like, sorry, can you hear? I don't know. I thought I muted everything here. So you have a right wing that it's very pro money and
Mm-hmm.
pro, and you have Nazis coming out of the woodwork, and you have all
Mm-hmm.
this stuff, and this horrible movements are coming up. They're very pro money, very anti people, very, and then you have a left that is just more like formed by the anger of the youth, right? And the anger of a lot of people that feel that life has been unfair to
Unfair.
them,
Yeah.
and it's a reaction. And like I think
Mm-hmm.
both sides of the political spectrum are reactionary to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I have learned a lot in terms of observing how politics really are, because at the end of the day, in my opinion, politicians don't work. Like very few of them do a good job.
Mm-hmm.
And now when I see people that are from the left and they are asking for specific things, I see where they're coming from, right? And I see when people are asking for free college or a better healthcare system, I understand where they're coming from, because when you read the news and you see, I read some news recently that this kid got he had an accident and got burned, and he almost lost his life, and he had to get like 27 surgeries, and he got a bill for like $1.7 million. And he literally, this person tweeted like, I am questioning if I want to be alive. That's when you understand, oh, okay, I think there's something that we must observe. And this is as like an outsider, right? Like, I'm not from here, so when I got here, there's a lot of illusion about the United States that I still kind of have. I like, this is a great country in a lot of ways, but you understand that as any other countries in the world, it's not perfect.
Sure.
But when that's on the left side, but when you see on the right how how horrible are the instances that these people are willing to go to not help other people, it's also horrifying.
Mm-hmm.
So it's I think being an outsider has helped me see where people are coming from and how they feel, and that has been really helpful. But at the same time, I'm a bit more jaded into what people have to say, because when you live the worst the world has to offer, like I did growing up in Venezuela, like honestly, I don't really care if an old white man is getting their taxes raised, or if a kid that went to like a super expensive school, says that he wants like Mao to come back and communism for everybody. Like I don't have time to hear any of those people.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah,
You don't sound jaded at all, Gonzalo. I feel like there's no hint of jading in there. I think that's a good lead in, though, because I think that's something when we talk about socialism, when we're talking about the definition of it, I think that means a lot of things to a lot of different people. And for me, I completely see where you're coming from with people, why people want these kind of things. And I grew up, I've talked about this before in the show. I always used to say I was poor, but I've learned that I've American poor, because once you start spending time in other countries and see what's happening around the world, you realize how privileged in general we are as Americans. Just being able to not have the poverty levels that are seen elsewhere. But to me, when I look at socialism, I actually brought up the dictionary definition, which is a political and economic theory of social organization, which advocates that the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned or regulated by the community as a whole. And I think that there's two things there that stick out to me. Number one, it's a great theory. Like that's the thing that I always think of when people talk about socialism and communism. It's a great in theory. Like, yeah, everyone works, everyone contributes, no one's left behind. It tends to fall apart in the details in my mind. But also, too, there's a big differentiation there between owned or regulated. And to me, communism moves more towards the state owning everything, and socialism is more about regulation of everything. And that's where the difference is in my head. And if you two have any different viewpoints on what socialism is, feel free to jump in. Let me know, or else we can move forward and start getting into some questions.
Yeah, I feel like socialism usually to me is more like I think of like a business owned by the people who work there. Like that's what I kind of think of as socialism, and even maybe like a state-owned or run business. I don't think of it as like a huge scale. I think it's even more a smaller scale is when I think of socialism. I don't think I think of it when it goes to the bigger scale. Then I think it's something else. So
Yeah.
I think socialism is the devil. No, I'm kidding. That should be that's a social media clip.
Yeah, there you go.
No, I agree. I think I don't know. I think a small scale of what socialism is when you see like a co-op owned business.
Yeah.
A co-op supermarket and those kind of businesses that
Yeah.
employee owned. And I think that's great. But the classic, it hasn't been implemented well. Vicious
right,
cycle
it's almost
of
as
life.
like when it's mismanaged. That's
Yeah.
when it's
Yeah.
it goes to
And that's
bad
part of the
place.
problem where I think, to me in general, and if you get into communism, Marxist theory, you start getting into, well, should we even have any form of government? Should it all be anarchy? And then it starts getting tricky because it's like, well, then how do you actually pick who's in charge if you don't have any kind of forms of government? It's like, well, then we pick someone to lead us. And it's like, well, you basically have a government again.
Yeah.
So it all gets very
Yeah.
tricky. And I think that that's the thing that for people on the right, and you'll often hear me talking about, some of my people from an economic perspective, things like co-ops and employee-owned businesses, some of them have done well, and that I think that totally fits inside a free market economy. I think if people want to band together and start a business, I just think there should be less regulation in general, and I think that's moving on from this because I don't want to get stuck just in the definition of socialism, but I think that's where the regulation comes in to be a problem for me. And I, as someone who owns a business and has to deal with so many regulations about some of the stupidest things, it gets very frustrating, where I think we should just be regulated less. And I think that's where, going into some questions for you, Gonzalo, I feel like if you look through, you actually gave me a great documentary to watch, and I just heard about it today, so I'm still getting into it. But in that documentary, it talks about how there is a woman in there who loves Hugo Chavez and is basically idolizing him. And there are some people that are in Venezuela still that have this kind of cult of personality around him. And initially, I don't think that the Bolivarian missions, which, am I saying that correct? The Bolivarian missions, that's all of the welfare programs that Chavez implemented. I don't think people were I don't think they were fighting against them. And I think a lot of people liked them.
Yeah.
And those Bolivarian missions, from what I understand, cover a lot of things. It's, healthcare, it's free housing. There are so many things that it covered. And eventually it kind of collapsed in itself when the oil reserves went down. But in your opinion, growing up in Venezuela, was that done initially with some good intentions? Did you ever see any benefit personally from them? Did you kind of go from liking them to realizing the problems with them, or were you against them from the start?
So when Chavez got in power, I was very young. I was a kid, and I didn't understand a lot of what was going on. But of course, I heard a lot. I heard a lot. Family, adults would talk about how they're gonna destroy the country and they're giving everything away for free. Because the premise of Chavez was putting the middle class and the rich against the poor against the middle class and the high class.
Yeah.
And the thing, because I don't have any issues with the social programs, what I am against are, well, first of all, they would say they would start something and then they would steal all the money. But at the same time, were the lies around a lot of these missions. You go and you talk with somebody that it's not from Venezuela, about Venezuelans, public school system, and they're like, yeah, Chavez brought public school. Public education in Venezuela has been free since 1870.
Yeah.
That's a fact. But of course, Chavez did a good job doing the propaganda that he was the one that did it. And same thing with like public health. Public health has always been free. But then you got, you rebrand all these programs and you put whatever name they came up with, because what they will usually do is change the name of like the program and make it something that would resonate with the people.
Yeah.
And they would just rebrand stuff. And that's the thing. I remember I was fortunate enough that I didn't have to go to a public school, because the public school system got very deteriorated very quickly when Chavez got in power, and the public health system as well. My family did the effort and they put me in a, because like there would it's not like here that a private school is just something very unattainable. It's like there's private schools of all price ranges in Venezuela. So I didn't see firsthand the as a student the education system, but I had a lot of friends that went to public schools and it was crazy. It wasn't good. Like there's a lot of crime happening there, because there's like the problem when Chavez got into power, it's not only the economics and all this stuff, it's also the social and cultural aspects of the country that went in absolute decline. I feel that Venezuela generationally, a generation is absolutely lost in terms of the reconstruction of a society as a fully functioning society. Because you have over 5 million people that left, and then you have a very big mass of people that believe in Chavez and their brain is absolutely washed and there's no way back from that. And you have these people are still in power, so it's like a chess game that is like there's no place, because even though if Chavez and Maduro and none of them are in power tomorrow, the country's culture and society like fibers are so deteriorated. So it will take, in my guess, and this is something a lot of people say, like at least 20, 30 years after these people are out of the power. Because like the other part is, even though the public missions and programs existed, they stole all the money. So they exist, but they don't exist. You go to a hospital and there's nothing. You go to a school and there's no supplies. So it's like a carcass of something at this point. Because they just stole everything.
Do you think the majority of why everything fell apart was because of the mismanagement and the corruption?
Yeah. Absolutely. And their resentment.
Yeah.
Because then it became, the government is giving us this program, so this is just for the people. So
so it's almost playing them against each other and creating more issue, which we know that all
but then the classic thing when they would start a program is, I don't know, just a random example, not coming from facts, but just as an anecdotal example, that usually what would happen is we need 50, we're gonna build a school. The school in reality costs to build $2 million. We need 50. And then this guy, the guy that said 50,
right?
Oh, it was 30. Oh yeah, 15. And then like it goes from like a budget of 50 to a budget of 2. They don't fully build the school, and a bunch of money got stolen, and the school ends up halfway built. No school for the kids. Everybody is screwed, and everybody is stolen money, and goes on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
And when you had the height of the oil prices, when Chavez was like in the early 2000s,
it was just like.
So powerful.
Things I was reading, it was just like a big party. Like basically they're just like, let's just spend this money and make us. And then there was no reserve left. And when everything ran out, it was just
they
over.
Stole everything.
Yeah.
Like they say Chavez, when he died, he had over $5 billion in a bank account.
Yeah. Not a shock at all. As a kind of another example, as watching a documentary and they were talking about the energy grid there, and there was basically a 6-step process this guy was talking about that just repeats. You first allow the electric grid to deteriorate. Then you say there's an electricity crisis. That allows you to award contracts without a bidding process to your friends. Then you negotiate inflated prices. You purchase scrap instead of new equipment, and then people die because of outages, but the government gets richer. And I feel like that kind of goes right along with what you just said happens. And that's just wash, rinse, and repeat to different situations.
The power grids thing was a beautiful moment in Venezuelan modern history, because that's when the corruption of the people, the poor, the government merged with the corrupt high society. Because the people that did that were kids that came from very wealthy families, very rich schools, and they did a pretty good dent in the country, like economics, because they would they would know somebody inside of any sort of government institution. They would bid for the contract. They would get for the contract. They would inflate the contract, and they would steal all the money. Even though these families are very rich, they come from like, I don't know. Imagine like the son of Robert Kraft, for an example. I don't know. It's a super random, like super rich person, but like he gets into that game, and he makes $2 billion. in a very short amount of time just with like these government contracts.
Right.
There's a book. It's like a fiction book, but at the same time, it's not. It's called The Adventures of Juan Planchard. There's 2 parts. And it's about this character that he's like a rich kid from Caracas that he gets into the scene, and he manages to get some contacts in the government to get some contracts, and he becomes like super rich. And it's like a very, very good description because like the author had insiders into those circles that gave them everything, and there's parts of the book that they explain, because there were like the very known corruption circles that there was that a lot of people got part of was the power grid situation that was through like government contract licitations, and then there was one through the foreign currency exchanges. And this one is a bit harder to explain, but like in a simpler explanation was, if $1 it's the equivalent to 4 bolivares. So 1 to 4 bolivares get you $1, but you can only get up to $3,000 at that price a year. That's it.
Yeah,
you can't buy more. Of course, that creates a parallel black market, right? That the prices, if like we're talking about 1 to 4, in the black market could have been 10,000 bolivares is 1. So we're talking, the official is 4 to 1, the black market is 10,000 to 1. So it's thousands percent, like hundreds or 1,000% more money to get access to foreign currency, right? So what would happen is, let's say me, Gonzalo, has a friend that he's a general, and he gets me access to the system. This is a way you can make $1 million in 10 minutes.
Right.
I buy the 3,000 of 4. I go to the black market and sell it to 10,000. I grab my profit. I have, you made a bunch of money. You go back again to the system. You buy more. You sell. And then you go back and then you do it as many times as you want. And you're pretty much like, it's like a crazy, like funnel of money that it's coming from the same place and ending in like a different place. And a lot of people did that. And that was the way of corruption that the regular people got access to.
Damn.
So when the economic crisis was hitting hard, what a lot of people would do was, there was travel agencies that they will give you packages to go to specific countries, because to travel you would have to do all this paperwork to get access. If you will go to the US for more than a month, you get access to $3,000. If you're gonna go to Colombia, you get like $750. So there were like agencies to Cuba, they will give you all the money. So travel agencies that will plan you a trip to Cuba, you will get there and you will go to this like kiosks and you will like swipe your card for a fee and they will give you the cash.
What?
And so you will get to keep the cash. You pay them a fee, you get to keep the cash, you keep your vacations cheap, you come back home and you make money out of that money.
Whoa.
Yeah.
How did that... That's like unreal.
Yeah. No, so that's the thing. Like,
I don't know a travel agent like that.
It became a business. It became...
That's insane.
I remember I have friends that would go to like... I don't know. I feel I was very dumb at the, or very naive.
Yeah.
Because I never partaked in any of those things.
Yeah.
But then,
wow.
and like that, there's so many things that happen in Venezuela that are just borderline surreal in terms of what's possible in a society. And then, that that's the thing. Venezuela got absolutely broke. And then the government and people, of course, the people that were swiping the cards, those are the ones to blame
right, those
about
are the bad guys.
So you're talking about like somebody that like swiped a card for like $3,000 in like Curacao, or you're talking about the guy that did a contract for like $2 billion for a subway system that never got built. Like it was they were a government for the people, but all about blaming the people about what was going on.
Well, and I think that goes into another question I have, though. Originally, I was going to ask, why do you think this isn't in the news more? And as I started researching even more, I found out Chavez and Maduro, they are really good at propaganda campaigns. And we talked a little bit about this morning, and I'd like to hear kind of your thoughts on this. I was listening to a journalist who left Venezuela, and she was saying that they were amazing at propaganda. They bought reporters in different countries, and they did a great job of being able to promote the government. And now it's really hard to catch up to that because so much money has been distributed. But can you tell me a little bit more about that part of what's happening?
So first of all, Chavez was probably one of the most charismatic human beings in the world. He dated like Naomi Campbell and like Courtney.
Wait,
Love
I'm sorry. Wait, he dated?
Yeah.
No, that's a real thing.
Yeah,
And Courtney Love? Oh my
Yeah.
goodness!
That's,
wow.
That's
Okay.
that's a
He-
stretch.
I mean, that's
like-
two really different people.
So for example,
I'm
I'm
with
gonna
you on
give you,
Naomi
I'm gonna,
Campbell,
I'm gonna
but,
give you
yeah.
a grievance about like, and this is more like American left and right and stuff. There were a lot of Hollywood actors that were like, Chavez is the man.
Wow.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of Hollywood actors that got money from Chavez to make movies, and they didn't
Right.
make the movies; they kept the money.
Yeah.
Danny Glover, Sean Penn, Jamie Foxx, they were all in Venezuela. Benicio del Toro, they were all in Venezuela. Danny Glover got $18 million to make a movie about like the liberator of Haiti, and that
Wow.
never happened.
That never made.
Oliver Stone got a bunch of money to make movies as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
so
Oliver
that's when
Stone,
you,
that's one of the
wild.
Hermania was talking about that movie
Yeah.
and said it was one of the greatest propaganda
Yeah.
pieces that were ever created.
Roger
was the Oliver Stone.
Waters.
Yeah. Wait, from Pink
Boots
Floyd?
Riley. Yeah.
Wow. All right.
Boots Riley, the film director. So that's the thing. So, well, Chavez was crazy charismatic. He had so much cash, and they started buying consciousness and propaganda very early in the game.
Yeah.
They pretty much made what a lot of people call the Sao Paulo Forum. That is when like all Latin America
Okay.
was left wing presence. So it was the Kirchners in Argentina, Lula in Brazil, Chavez, Evo Morales in Colombia, and then there was like others. But
Yeah.
they did.
Yeah.
But like Chavez would finance the campaigns. So they would like through all oil companies. There's like a scandal you should check out. It's like Odebrecht, that it's the biggest construction company in the hemisphere or something. There's like
Yeah.
a whole case of all like the money they funnel through there to pay for like the campaigns of all these presidents. So besides that, I told you early, one thing that Chavez did was through the oil companies, they would buy oil for heating for the very poor neighborhoods here in the U.S.
Yeah.
in the Bronx, in like all the like in the poor neighborhoods in like Dorchester, I think here in Boston, in like all the big cities where like the winter was really hard, like they would like through Citgo and like the oil companies. I don't know if it was through Citgo or another one, but they would like funnel oil and money, and then you would like then it wasn't a surprise to see a mural of Chavez in the Bronx,
Right. Which is just.
and people would be like, yeah, he's the best. I don't
Yeah.
know, like because there was at some point. I don't know if it still
I
is.
think I remember. I remember.
So it
seeing
was that, and then through the past of the years, the world has changed, but they have still invested a lot of money into that. So right now, if you go, there's a couple media outlets. There's one called Gray Zone, and there's another one that they're like the equivalent to like Newsmax and whatever. Like they're very far left, and they're just very so they sometimes post on Twitter and Instagram that we're in Venezuela and everything is great, but what they don't show is like they have like 12 bodyguards each, and they're going in
Sure,
armored cars. Like, you
right.
know what I mean? Like it's just ridiculous. But what that does a really good job is like people get really pissed. People get so pissed. Like how and in my personal case, I learned to like be better about managing how I feel about that. But you see what's happening in Venezuela. You talk to your family. Everything is horrible.
Man.
It's miserable. And then you see a gringo. Like you see an American doing, oh yeah, this is awesome. Venezuela
This
is
is
awesome.
wonderful,
Maduro's the
yeah.
man. And like a t-shirt of Chavez. And the thing is that propaganda has reached like American universities.
Right.
And a lot of people, there's photos of the founder of the Black Lives Matter organization with Maduro. Like that's how far the money has gone.
Yeah.
and that's when it becomes a matter of interpretation once again. How do you interpret politics and like what's going on? For me, and this is more like a very mixed thing, right? I support the Black Lives Matter movement, but when you talk to me about the founder, she can,
Right.
no, I have no interest about talking about her because
Exactly. Yeah. Same.
she does propaganda for a murderer.
Right.
And then when you talk about, in the case of the right, how they have done a good job like channeling that anger to the left in the Venezuelans. If you go to in Florida, to the very Venezuelan neighborhoods, there are Doral, Weston, and parts of Miami, it's like the Cubans, like very conservative, hardline right wing. In the elections, they would like support Trump, and that was used as an advantage. Trump for a long time promised that he was going to do something to help. He did some stuff. I got to give him that. He was the only one that like sanctioned a lot of people that needed to be sanctioned. They put Maduro and others as like most wanted people by several organizations.
Right.
But then you see how well, like how propaganda works.
Yeah.
From one hand, you have a group of people that are just escape a country. They're tired, they're exhausted, they're pissed, they're unhappy, they miss where they're from, and you give them, and then you have the left doing all this stuff. It's so easy. It's like, oh, look, these people are trying to turn the U.S. into Venezuela.
Yeah.
And that has been my biggest issue in my time here, especially last year with the election, like the way Venezuelans and the Venezuelan cause has been weaponized. Because for the right, it's just like a campaign tool.
Yep.
Don't vote for whoever. Don't vote for Bernie. Don't vote for Biden because they're going to turn U.S. into Venezuela, and we can't allow that. And then you see like the furry guy from the insurrection sending a video.
The Viking guy, yeah.
I hope
Viking guy.
the Venezuelan people get their freedom. You know what I mean? And then you get like the machines were hacked by Hugo Chavez and whatever. And then you get the left, and you see Bernie Sanders, AOC, and them never condemning Maduro.
Yeah.
They keep it like in a very, they keep it in the gray area. He's the president. He's bad, but he's the president. Even though like there's like the constitutional president that is Juan Guaido.
Right.
That's like the other part, like the Venezuelan parallel government thing that's like a lot going on there. But then you get that Bernie doesn't say anything. AOC keeps it like low key. Ilhan Omar says some very ridiculous remarks, and they just never are like, oh yeah, Maduro's the dictator, he needs to be out.
Yeah.
Right.
Even though like the brutality is absurd from him.
One of the things so Bernie Sanders is I think we talked about him before in the show, whether you like his policies or not, which I don't, generally speaking. He seems to be pretty consistent, and he seems like a real dude. Like, I'd love to grab a beer with Bernie. That would be a cool thing, and talk to him. I did read recently, he did say some things about Maduro and condemned him. I know now the rest of the squad, I haven't seen it from them, but at least he kind of came back. And that, going back to kind of using it as a pawn, when I was doing some research into what Bernie had said about Venezuela, it popped up that he had said that the American dream lives in Venezuela. And then when I researched a little more, I found out that that was an article that was posted on his website that was attributed to him. And I agree 100%. And it's not just Venezuela, but it's everywhere, where everything is, well, yeah, this is bad, but the other side is worse. And this is why Venezuela is going to be used to show you that socialism is bad. And then it's like, well, but they get free healthcare, and you go back and forth.
Yeah.
And I think that everyone should take a look. That documentary, I was trying to think of the name earlier, but I forgot it, but it's Once Upon a Time in Venezuela. And seeing documentaries about what's actually happening there, when you put a face to it, and you see one of the most heartbreaking moments that I saw in that documentary, there was a boy who was in the water. It was in Maracaibo, a large lake there that's one of the largest resources for oil in Venezuela. And they were swimming, and their feet were covered in oil, him and his sister. And they found this turtle that was swimming, and the turtle was just coated top to bottom in oil. And the kid got really excited and said, wow, these bring really good soup. And the sister was like, well, it's a small turtle. And he's like, I don't care. Like, and they were so excited. And that should be a moment where it's like, oh, that's cool. Two little kids playing in the water. But you see these kids covered in oil about to eat a turtle that they are so excited to have because it's food. And it should break all of our hearts. And that should be what the focus is on. And when we look at, I mean, we talked early on, $1.4 billion in aid over the past 5 years, and I'm not sure. I think it's 2 million or 3 million migrants have gone to
5.
Colombia. Well, 5.5 overall.
Colombia, yeah, two and something, yeah.
Jumping across the border there, and that's a country of I think 20 million people or 30 million people, and so it's a huge portion of the population, and we're just it's not talked about as other than a bargaining chip.
I think a lot of what's like condensing everything about Venezuela that happens in the spectrum of the world, a lot of it is like Maduro wins because he has more money and because he's evil, of course. But when you take it to like smaller battles, and to give you some points that we're talking about propaganda, I'm gonna give you an example. You just said about the pollution and the contamination in the Maracaibo Lake. Like how the Amazon is being destroyed, the way that it's being destroyed through like mining, all that stuff.
Yeah.
There's like a lot of premises about like the left being ecologically conscious and all of that. But when you see what's happening in Venezuela, it's horrendous. But it's never gonna be in the media because like Maduro it's one of the boys in the club. Yeah. So like you see like how, for example, Greta Thunberg or whoever activist talks about Brazil and Bolsonaro, that like that guy, it's a case, but they talk about him and the destruction of the Amazon there. Bolsonaro's destroying the Amazon and all that because but then you see what's happening in Venezuela, that it's Maduro that is doing stuff that is way worse, and there's nothing.
Right.
And that's the sad thing, and that's what angers me, because there's so many things going on. It's such a it's such an uphill battle for Venezuelans. And then in the case of the US, everything is happening in Venezuela, and then you get a kid from Northeastern University come and tell you that Venezuela is awesome because X, Y, and Z. They have never been there. Like, that angers me. That pisses me off so much. I try to keep my calm, but then I try to understand, like, okay, where's this coming from? But then you realize that, like, the people are too polarized. Like, I think it's very hard to be a way back to fully understanding that the world is a bit less binary than black and white, Democrat, Republican, communism, fascism. And I think that's something that has been lost in a lot of people, like that the world is not binary. Decisions are not binary. And when you see what happens in Venezuela and the reflection of like how people carry that cross, because we're talking about over 5 million people that have left recently, plus the whole bunch of the left as soon as Chavez got in power, and the other bunch around 2002 when the coup that they try to get Chavez out. You're talking about millions of people that they left their place. They left their home to go to places, to new languages, to new things, to carry something. And then you get, every day you're humiliated by the Venezuelan government. You don't get access to passports. There's no embassy. Man. You get you are a fifth-class citizen, right? You are an outsider in every situation. You have no rights. That's when it's hard. That's what it's hard. That's when I talk about it and I get pissed. Yeah. Because it's like, it's not only how our country's awful, it got destroyed and all that. It's just that we go out there, we put our best effort into, carry on, and they still manage to make our lives miserable. Right. The Venezuelan government. And in my case, that I'm lucky to have a nice life, right? That I have a good job and I'm not, that I don't have like 7 roommates and I wash cars until 3 a.m. like a lot of people do. I did it at some point. Like I went through my thins and thicks, but just the fact that I see my fellow Venezuelans going through what they're going for, crossing from Venezuela to try to go to like Argentina or Peru on foot. Or I saw some news. I don't know if it's true. I couldn't research. They arrested like 87 Venezuelans in the Mexican desert trying to cross the border. Like, imagine trying to come from Venezuela to get to Mexico to try across the border. So can you imagine the level of desperation people have? Yeah. So I have to listen to some kid here.
Yeah,
like,
that's that's exactly what I thought.
That's the most painful thing about this situation.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's even talking about. Oh, go ahead, Gretchen.
Go ahead. No, I was gonna say. So I don't know your story about how you came to the United States. Was it difficult whenever you came?
I was fortunate enough. I came here to like a film school program. Thanks to like my family that supported me with that, and then I made the decision to stay. I was very involved in like the whole protest movement back home and like the opposition, and I had a lot of involvement with that throughout the years. And then in the last few years, when stuff got really hard, I was working for like a political organization that was like neutral. It was more about like elections and democracy more than like partisan stuff. But that's the thing, like the government targets all sorts of organizations, even though they're impartial. The government targets them, and they would say that we are trained by the CIA to do a coup, all that shit. And so I came here. My plan was never to stay here. Like, my plan was to come here and then I come back, and then life got way harder. And right now, it's still bad. It's better-ish. There's a weird economic bubble happening, but still, like it's a very bad thing. But I see the stories. I know like people that have gone through like very horrible stuff. There's a comedian, Jose Rafael Guzman. He's our Seth Rogen. Like that's the equivalent. Like very stoner guy. He makes like very strange comedy. He was making he would make this documentary series for a while in Mexico that he would like do like, I'm gonna live like a homeless man for a week, and he does like crazy stuff like that. And he did one that he decided to do the walk from Venezuela to Peru with the migrants.
How long is that walk? Do you know?
It's like 2 weeks. It's like,
oh my
that's
God.
Crazy.
No, it's like ridiculous. Like people like and then he met this group of people, and like the stories are so sad. Like, oh, what do you have? This is all I have with me: a little backpack with like 2 pairs of shoes and a t-shirt, and you're walking through like the Andes that is freezing.
Yeah,
these people are like, they get to like a small town in Colombia. They pawn some stuff to get some cash for a bus, and it's millions of people are like that.
Yeah.
Dozens have died, frozen, ran over by cars. So it's just like the most. It's horrible.
It's heartbreaking.
Because when you talk about the Syrian crisis, that it's really bad.
Yeah.
That's in the so far away.
This is here. Yeah, it's like
we're
so
talking
close.
about a flight Miami-Caracas is 3 hours.
Yeah.
2:45 a good time. Like it's there. It's the backyard.
Right.
And then it's that. Plus, having a government that is like a criminal organization.
Yeah.
That drug traffics, kills, kidnaps, destroys. That they do anything in their power. They have the money to cover themselves. I was telling you that they arrested this guy that he's supposed to be like the front man for Maduro, as for like his money. He's in Cape Verde. He has been arrested for the U.S. has been trying to extradite him for 6 months. So far, the cost of his defense has been over $120 million.
It's insane.
In
Absolutely
lawyers.
insane.
Wow.
Yeah.
And bribes and stuff.
Wow.
And
Well,
then go ahead.
No, I was going to say, talking about kind of the resistance, you said you were involved in that, and I didn't want to hear the story earlier because I didn't want to ruin it. for today, but you talked about being as part of the protests in 2008, I think it was. And what happened to you in 2008?
No, I mean, in 2008, I was just in school, right? Like, I was just like protesting. And the thing with me was every time that there was like a protest, every time that I was there, since I was very young.
Yeah.
I was always present. I was always there because I wanted a change. I wanted something better. I've always wanted something better. And like, I would go there and I'd be there, tear gas and all that stuff. And there were times that we almost would get arrested, and there would be times that like the government would like release their gangs and people would shoot. And like there were times I saw some, like I remember in like the craziest protest cycle that was 2014. I remember like the first day of that protest there was like if I'm not wrong, like 4 people died that day. And I remember I was there like in the place where it all started, like 2 blocks away. There's like one of the most famous people that died there, that it was this kid that got shot by like the military police. He was running, he got shot in the back. And that was 3 months of protests that never stopped.
Damn.
It was every day.
Wow.
And it was people were comparing it. That was when like the Ukrainians were protesting, and people were like giving a lot of parallels to that. I think they were braver than us, but I also think the Venezuelan government is way more ruthless.
Yeah,
because they arrested over 3,000 people and tortured them. I have a cousin, a friend that he has been arrested for 5 years. He was arrested around that time, and they just move his audience all the time. I know a couple people that got tortured in very messed up ways, about like sexual torture, like men.
And going back to what you were saying, this is the problem in general. The media, the national media is something I've obviously had a problem with for a while. And, it doesn't get covered in the liberal press, and in the right-wing press, you have people like Tommy Lahren, who's just yelling and saying, we're going to be like Venezuela, but there's no actual discussion about
context.
Until you start talking to someone from Venezuela, until you start looking at documentaries, we have no concept in America. I was watching a BBC documentary where a guy had been taken into jail, and when he was doing his interview, they had his arm had a big scar running through it. And they released a video that while he was in jail, one of the guards was sympathetic to him. So that's something too that I felt was interesting, because there apparently are a lot of the guards and cops that are still sympathetic to the cause and are trying to do something different. And that's something, they went back to a clip of when he was actually in custody, and his arms were just ripped open. There was iodine, blood everywhere. It was open wounds. He was begging for someone to help him, both locally and internationally. And he stayed in jail for several years until he was finally let out with no kind of uproar. And it's weird that we're hearing about these kind of things now just because I happened upon a YouTube documentary in the BBC instead of something that should be talked about in the front pages everywhere.
A couple days ago was the 4th year anniversary of this kid that got killed in a protest. Juan Pernalete was his name, I think. And he got killed because he got shot. There's mixed stories, but pretty much he got a National Guard, a police officer, whatever it was, shot him a tear gas grenade into the chest. And like literally fractured his chest and killed him on the spot.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of like, that's police brutality to the top. There were protests, stuff like that happened. The government would send gangs to shoot people. The military would use real bullets, or they would like shoot tear gas cans directly to people, or they would like, there was a video you can find that the house, like a protesters got ran over by like one of those police tanks that is not like a full tank, but it's like armored vehicle. They would use like this claw that it was like a claw they would like throw with a chain, almost like fishing people. They would drag people in the motorcycles and beat them with the helmets. Like, that's a level of police brutality. And what happens in the media here in the States is what you're saying. When something gets talked in the liberal media, it's very watered down. Because they're trying to like they're trying to see, there's good people on both sides, quoting a former president, and they play it that way,
Right.
So when like the whole thing about the Juan Guaido happened, that he is constitutionally the president,
Right.
there you wouldn't see any media outlets putting President Juan Guaido. They would put self-appointed president or opposition leader.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a great example of the bias that there exists, like that
Right.
people can't get past to the propaganda in their minds. And then like the news that you'd see that are critical are more like economic, and they touch a little bit on like the sanctions thing. That that the sanctions are not really doing anything. They're sanctioning people because like they're sanctioning like a bunch of like military people to come here and spend their money in Disney World. That's what it's avoiding. The sanctions, what are they doing? It's like if one of those people tries to come here and like buy a house in Miami, they're gonna get arrested on the spot because they're human rights violators. That's what the sanctions are doing. But then you're talking about how the sanctions are not letting the vaccines in, and then on the other hand, you find out that the organization that is in charge of distributing the vaccines is offering 3 million doses of the AstraZeneca, and they say no because screw the people, and we just want to get the Russian vaccine. Yeah, like the sanctions aren't doing anything, and the sanctions plus having this huge machine of propaganda, it's the perfect storm because you can attribute everything to the sanctions. This thing happened, sanctions. Okay, sanctions. Like it's too easy. It's just like there's no. You don't even have to look for any other culprit. It's there, the Yankees and the sanctions and.
Well, we get blamed for a lot, and I think that obviously, we have done a lot of bad things, but I think, I'm clearly often very frustrated with the left media, but I'm also frustrated by things where Donald Trump, I think, actually had a chance to do something good, and there are two things that really bothered me in that situation. Number one, in general, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat in office, I always feel very uncomfortable when we have our State of the Union addresses and they bring up some war hero or a family member of someone who died and we just stare at them and clap. And I want to support them and I want to say, wow, like you are all heroes. But in that setting, it's completely propaganda. It's our American version of propaganda. And it comes from all presidents. And they brought Juan Guaido to the State of the Union and they stood him up. And I actually texted my friend, the one who was shot in a protest. And I thought something good was going to happen. I said, you know what, if this is starting to get press, at least on the right, because that's the problem with the press on the right, is unless Trump was saying it was good, you weren't going to hear about it. And it was all about what the narrative was. But I thought that was a chance. Okay, we're talking about Juan Guaido. There might be a change. I was excited for her and for my friends that are from Venezuela. And then apparently John Bolton worked behind the scenes, which we talked a little bit about him earlier when we were off air. He's someone that I think liberals will say, well, that's one of those terrible conservatives, and conservatives generally don't like the guy. He's a war hawk. But in a situation where there was actually a chance for change, there were, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I think there were, a convoy of aid that was coming in from Colombia that was brought there by the Americans going across the border, and they wouldn't let the aid in.
Not only the Americans, it was like all people. There was like a Live Aid style concert.
Yeah.
That was a very strange day.
Yeah.
And the National Guard burned it, and it was like a thing.
The National Guard of Venezuela burned medicine, supplies, and food.
And then there was like an article that saying American news media article saying that it was the protesters burning it to just blame the government. Like it was just like a whole thing. And I remember those days when Bolton and Abrams, what's his name, the guy that did like the Nicaragua thing.
I forget
that he was also in the government. That famous video of Ilhan Omar questioning him for being a war criminal, all this stuff that I saw a lot of my friends sharing, and I was just like, it's crazy because like these people were known to pick wars in a few years ago, and in this case they were just like, no, we're trying to figure out how to put medicines in like this. That's pretty much how far we're going.
Wow.
And then in terms of the promises of the past administration to Venezuelans, for years, there was the whole thing about the TPS, the temporary protection status for Venezuelans. Trump could have approved that with a signature.
Yeah.
He promised it for months. Biden approved it like 2 weeks into his term.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that says a lot. This guy the past administration wanted to capitalize on the Venezuelan, the support he had from the Venezuelan community, and he never gave them anything.
Right. And that's the thing in general, like our government, I say that our government is better than what's happening in Venezuela by far, obviously, but we don't get things done. And that's where it becomes so politicized. If Biden signs it, there's going to be a lot of people on the right who are like, well, why are we doing that? Why are we protecting these people that aren't even our citizens? And then if Trump would have signed that, people would have been like, look at us. Like, we are helping people. And the same goes in the left, and nothing gets done. And when you look at what's happening in Venezuela, it's so, so disappointing. And I just hope at some point people can actually start talking about these problems and moving something forward. But I don't know. Do you ever see that day happening? I mean, I think that goes to either of you, because that's my biggest fear in this country is we become so polarized that we can't move forward. And I don't know. Does that ever change? What makes that change?
I mean, I told you early my thoughts. I love that, Biden is by far not perfect. Mm-hmm. I find him that he's a very charismatic guy and he's doing his thing. But I appreciate that he's doing a better job than everybody expected him to do. And that is pissing off the far right and the far left. Mm-hmm. And that's awesome.
Yeah.
Because do you see them? Like, everybody's just absolutely livid. Because the bar was pretty low.
It was. It was.
Because the bar was, you have on one side, you have, what's the name of the guy that did like sex trafficking and like all those weird Congress
Matt
people
Gaetz. Okay, well, let me just say, I hate when people use Matt Gaetz as an example of Republic. I think most people hate that dude.
But it's that guy, and then like the woman that would like set all the insurrection stuff, and then you have AOC and the other people on the other side, like just trying to make everything about them. And then you have Biden like doing his thing, like he shows up, he does the work. There's things that he could do better, yes, but that's the other part of that is hilarious about politics here. Biden got in the office and you would see all the like the Marxist youth. Oh, why you haven't done this? Why you haven't done that? It's just like they think politics is just whatever they do, like that people wake up and you make stuff happen this way. And then you have the right on the other side. This guy is going to destroy it. One thing that I find hilarious, for example, with like Biden talk about like the tax things, and then you see somebody that makes like $10,000 a year and whatever, how is he going to tax the people that make for more than $400,000 a year? Like, you're literally never going to see that amount of money. Why do you care so much? And so yeah, I think we are. I don't think that's gonna happen. What you're saying, that we're gonna get back into this groove, but I think since there's a generational change happening, and a more humane generation coming in right now, a lot of that generation is very radicalized. But I think once they age, and they graduate college and they start getting jobs and stuff.
And living life.
I think stuff is gonna get a bit more stable.
Yeah.
Because I also think that people are also very tired of the polarization.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with that. I'm afraid though this has gone borderline cult-like. And I think that's even going back to when I watched that documentary. It was so funny seeing that woman she was holding a doll, an action figure of Hugo Chavez, and talking about how she was hugging it. She makes anyone that comes into her bedroom touch a picture of his face. It was amazing how much she worshipped him. And all I saw in that, I thought I saw a bunch of people with their big Trump signs hanging off the back of their truck. And then I saw a bunch of people that talk about how AOC is the next coming of Christ. And we idolize these politicians in America, and that's destroying us. Like that. Yeah. No, I don't. And this is, again, coming from someone who eventually does potentially want to run for office. You can't trust politicians. Like, that's no politician out there I can look at and say, you know what? I mean, Bernie Sanders, Mitt Romney, they seem to do what they want to do, and you can pretty much mostly count on them, even if
Set
you
your watch by
disagree.
it, yeah.
You can say, all right, well, at least it seems like you're coming from a place where you're actually believing what you're saying. But I mean, that's part of the problem with Trump following John Bolton versus people who are actually living through what was happening in Venezuela. And you bring up these props on both sides. It's here's the props that we're going to use these people for, and then not solve anything and wait until we need to have something happen where we can bring them back into the mix. Oh, there's a crisis over here. Let's bring those poor Venezuelans in to show that we need to go fix this. And it's just become a mix. But I think you have a little more hope than me, because I feel like we've been so indoctrinated now, and because of social media we get into these bubbles. But I think that's why it's important to have conversations like this where we can hear it from the horse's mouth. No offense. But what's actually happening?
Ultimately, for me, I love the US. Like, honestly, like I mean, I have days that I'm just like, what the hell is going on with people here? Why are they doing that?
Yeah.
But ultimately, I love it here. The opportunities that I have gotten here have been incredible. The amount of people I have met that are so influential in the world, you know, that I have met and I have had the opportunity to talk to, and all the good jobs and stuff that I have done, and ultimately, that's what I take. Yes, there are days like, because like it goes from like a crazy illusion that you think this is the best place on earth, and there's like, because like that's what you get from all the movies and all this stuff, and you think that it's awesome, and then you get here and you realize like, oh, there's a lot of flaws and there's a lot going on. But when I take it to my personal experience, like, this place has given me so much in so little time. Like that I had to cram years of life in 5 years. Like to be, you know, up to what my peers are up to, and this is the kind of place that lets you do it.
Sure.
It's tough, because like sometimes I feel like, this is a country that like it's run on how much you work, and there's not a culture of rest.
No,
but
there's definitely not.
But it's like this is a country, if you want to be rich, you're gonna be rich. Like that's how it, you know, there's many ways to skin a cat. That's one of my favorite American sayings. But but if you just try to do what you need to do, you get there. Like, I feel there's a lot of systematic and institutional issues that don't allow people to get to where they want or should be. Absolutely. But I feel there's also workarounds. I feel there's also a matter of, and this is like very, very like, you gotta pick up yourself from the bootstraps, but it's true. Like you show up and you do what you gotta do, and you and opportunities are real and true, and that's never gonna change. The American dream, it's absolutely alive, even despite what people might say. But I think it takes a little bit more of humanity for it to be better.
Yeah.
Right.
I think the work part is pretty good, but I think once this place achieves a better state in how their humanity and people, like, appreciation and all that stuff, like, I think that's when it will be back to be
when
what
will
it
change.
was.
Yeah.
Well, I think that the humanity is a great way. Gretchen, I have a couple questions to wrap up, but before I do, is there anything else you want to ask Gonzalo before we go?
This was like really wonderful. Actually, I do have one question that I thought of. You said your cousin is down there in prison, but are your parents? Where are your parents at?
So yeah, my parents live in different cities. And then this cousin of mine, it's more like a family friend. A lot to clarify that. No, I don't know. My dad texting me. It's like, who's in jail? But but yeah, my dad lives in the capital in Caracas. My mom lives in Valencia. That is the city.
And do you have like a lot of contact with them? And
yeah, I talk to my parents. My mom every day. My dad almost every day. We keep a good contact. I talk with the other relatives that are there. I was trying to keep in touch with them. Just trying to figure out how they are. So yeah, I mean, contact is possible, thank God.
Yeah. And are they doing well? Are they,
well, hanging in there?
Sure.
As any other like Venezuelan that is abroad, we send stuff, money, or whatever they need.
They need.
There's a height in the like door to door, like carrier companies. Like there's
Really?
so many companies that like you can ship boxes of stuff.
Oh, wow.
And it's hilarious because it's like a huge business. So it's pretty much like it's crazy how organized it is at this point. I sent some boxes to my parents, and they tell you, oh yeah, to the boxes, and they just to give you prices. The reference is the Home Depot boxes. So yeah, to send a Home Depot, like the medium Home Depot box, is $50, up to 70 pounds. So you grab
up to 70 pounds.
So you grab the box and fill it out with stuff.
That's cheaper than sending a box across the country, quite
like
honestly.
Legal stuff, but it's through ship, so it takes like 3 weeks. But you know, and then like they pick it up or they deliver it to like the address.
Wow.
And there's like companies, so many of those companies. There are some that like pick up the stuff in your house. In this case, they send you like a UPS thing, so you can send the box from where you are to their offices in like Florida, and then they ship.
They send it.
No, it's crazy how it has become a system.
That's wild.
Wow.
Well, I'm glad your family is okay.
Yeah, I think
definitely.
my dad's watching.
Yeah.
Hello, Gonzalo's dad. Now, I have a question for you. I had this drink. I forget what it's called. Just tried to Google it. Kwas. It's fermented. It's some kind of fermented or malted drink from Venezuela. Have you had this drink?
Kwas?
Kwas?
Is it not
I don't know. It's made from like... No, it's not. It's or Malta. Is it Malta?
Oh, Malta.
Maltina?
Hell yeah. Malta is the best. Maltine.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
See.
It's the best.
Man, I would love to go to Venezuela sometime when it becomes safe to travel again. I didn't mention this, but I did go to Colombia, which is right next door. And I absolutely love that country. It's
my sister went there too and loved it.
Beautiful,
Awesome.
Beautiful country, amazing people. One of my 2 favorite countries I visited, and I would love to check out Venezuela. And I had so much good food in the area. I tried Malta, and my friend that was from Venezuela, the one who was shot, she used to work at the plant that created that. And she said that apparently they made dog food in the same plant. And I didn't know that because she tasted and she's like, what do you think that tastes like? And I was like, she was like, isn't it amazing? And I was like, it kind of tastes like dog food. She's like, well, you know. And she actually told me that they're made in the same plant. I don't think... that's one of the rare things where I feel like everyone I've met from Venezuela absolutely loves it. But man, that is...
Malta is insane. It's so good. It's like such a filling drink. Like we have a joke that it's like you drink one of those and like you jump and you're full. You can go to the next meal.
Yeah.
But no, the thing is in Venezuela there's one of the few companies that have survived. It's called Empresas Polar. And it's the biggest company in the country, and they pretty much feed the country.
Oh, wow.
It has been one of the few companies that has managed to not be taken over by the government.
Right.
They have expanded at this point. Like they realized that they knew that at some point that could end, so they have expanded to like Spain and here in the U.S. and Colombia.
Smart.
But they make everything. They are the ones that have like the license to make like Pepsi and like Gatorade in Venezuela. So like they make all that stuff, but they make everything.
Wow.
Like we're talking from like sports drinks to like flour and cookies and ice cream and everything that is food related. It's them. Wow. But Malta is the best.
There's a great Venezuelan place in Pittsburgh that I had that's in the south side of Pittsburgh that a friend of mine, her family owns it, and it's amazing food. But that Malta, whew, well, that's the one thing I think we'll disagree on throughout this podcast. I'll try it again at some point. I'll have to try it again. That's what I wanted to wrap up with you, though. We talked about family, we talked about Malta, and I think that's where we talk about humanity. I think one of my questions for you is, I think what often gets lost is the fact that you love America, which is so encouraging to hear, because I feel like we do have a country we are all blessed to be in America.
Hell yeah.
Tough situations, but in general, we have so many opportunities here. But what gets lost is the fact that 5 years ago, you were in your home country with your family and around people you knew and grew up with, and now you're here, and I think we often forget about, wow, that's a gigantic change. And I think what is it that you miss most about Venezuela?
that's something as you can imagine, I talk about a lot with my friends. Ray, well, you have met Andres. He lives here. He's one of my best friends from back home, and we live here together. I mean, not together in the same house, but in the same close by.
Yeah.
And we talk a lot about the thing about Venezuela that we miss is moments, of course. But the thing about those moments is that those moments are never coming back, because so many people have left that our friends from back home are just spread all over the world, and times changed, and it's harder to catch up because people are in different time zones, people are living through different things, some are having kids and all that, and I miss a lot of that. I mean, I miss a lot of those like spontaneous moments that we will have. I will have my friends, spontaneous moments. I will have my family. I miss being with my mom and just, you know, my mom and I were very close, and you know, we would go out and eat and hang out, and you know, or with my dad, that we would always go to like different restaurants, and we would different restaurants. We would always go to like the same 3 restaurants. It was like an Italian restaurant, a Spanish restaurant, and like this more like Venezuelan restaurant, and we would go to those 3 all the time, and I miss that. I miss that a lot, and I cherish those moments a lot because it's you know, they're very important for me, and a lot of those moments are not happening again. And I think a lot about that, and I think a lot about the weather for sure. Caracas has the best weather in the world, like by far. And I miss you know, I miss the sense of belonging in my surroundings, that I am from here and these people are my people. I have done a pretty decent job in adapting to life here, but I'm always gonna be an outsider, and I get it. I made peace with it, but I miss that sense of like, well, I'm from here, despite me not being super happy about the situation. I feel there's like a connection that you have with a place that you're from.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Completely understand.
Do you feel that you've been kind of demonized or anything like that when you've like after you came? Do you feel like there's a feeling that because you feel like you're an outsider? Is that coming from a specific place?
It comes from the place of like with all the stuff that is happening here, you feel so powerless and hopeless sometimes, because I'm not from here, so I'm like that. I feel like sometimes that makes you feel less than the
like
people are from here.
Yeah.
And then you see what happens. You know, you see like when people are racist towards Latino immigrants, or when you see like you know, police brutality against Latinos, and specifically in the case of Latinos, to not go any further than that.
Yeah.
I talk about this with my girlfriend a lot, that sometimes I get scared, because it's like, it's such a sense of hopelessness that my country and my government let me down, and who else is gonna care for me?
Right.
But at the same time, that I try to go and just work around that, because like that's not gonna change. That's the painful thing about the Venezuelan situation, that and this is something and this is like the easiest explanation that I can give to people about why is it so painful. When you mourn or you grieve somebody, like somebody passed away, and that person passed away, and you gotta go through like the steps and figure it out. But when you have to leave a place, you are pretty much, it's like your own funeral almost. Like, because you are leaving who you are behind to go be somebody else in a new place. And in the case of Venezuela, it's like there's like so many circumstances that just like you go, and there's like a door that locks behind you, because there are no guarantees of going back. And that's very tough. In my case, I accepted that, and I made peace with it, and I decided that my new life was going to be my new life. And there's a lot of people that have a really hard time dealing with that. I see it. I talk to a lot of people that they just process it in a way that they just feel they're going to go back at some point. I made peace with the fact that I might never go back.
Yeah.
Or if I go back, it's when I'm in like my 50s, or to like go and die there, you know, like
Sure.
But at the same time, I have a pretty awesome life here, and I have a better life, and I'm a very successful life, a very happy life. You know, not a lot of people can say they work doing what they love to do in a different country, doing their thing, getting paid well, and living a good life. Not even people from here can say that. So why am I gonna just beat myself with feeling less if I am doing so well?
Okay. Well, I love that, Gretchen. We're gonna wrap up. I'm gonna come back to you, Gonzalo, and just ask you what's next, what we should be doing when we talk about Venezuela. But we always wrap up with things that Gretchen and I may have learned here in this conversation. So, Gretchen, do you want to go and talk about what you learned through this conversation?
Yeah, I feel like it's just even thinking about humanity and understanding what's going on in other countries really puts into perspective what's happening here. I think hearing you talk about being a transplant, coming here, and your feelings about being here, it's almost solidified my view of what's happening at our border and how we are treating people that are coming here, and how I use the royal we, because of course we're not all doing it, but we all have a hand in it, and we all can prevent it, and we all can speak up about it. But the demonization of people coming here, and how we treat people that are different than us in general, and you know, people that are just different, and why that's a bad thing, and why people make it a bad thing, and it's not a bad thing. It's actually really a wonderful thing. Also, just your stories they were shocking and were almost dumbfounding to me that they could happen, and that they have happened, and that they're continuing to happen, and that your poor family is still there, and that you're away from them. And I think Ray and I both know what it's like to go through loss. I mean, I think everybody, well, unless they're very young and they don't know what it's like to lose a part of yourself, meaning from family members or marriages or whatever. Going through a trauma like that is very heavy, and it has lasting implications. And I feel like people that are coming here are really seeking help and seeking a better life. And you're kind of the poster child in my brain now of what it can be and what it should be. And yeah, that gives me a lot of hope that we can really change what is going on here more, you know, than what we can change anywhere else, but here most of all.
Well, I think piggybacking on that, you've always been my poster child. I have a poster of you hanging up in my bedroom since I met you up in Boston. So
from my date from the Boston Globe.
Oh my goodness. Actually, that was, I wasn't planning on telling this story, but very quickly, Gonzalo was actually in it was a newspaper. Tell the story. You're going to tell it better than I am.
It's so the Boston Globe does a thing called a dinner with Cupid. So they match you to go to like on a blind date, and then they make you answer questions and write about it. And it was a big thing at the office that I used to work at, and of course the news spread pretty quickly. And Ray had a photo of the article.
Yeah.
Oh,
I took a picture of the
awesome.
article, and when I was texting him, I was like, "Oh, what is that picture? I forget what it is." And I zoomed in, and it was him and the woman from the date. Like, that's his profile picture in my phone. Is that Boston article?
Awesome.
So that's that one blown up real big in my bedroom. But on a serious note, I think that I agree with everything you said there, Gretchen. I do think that the one thing that I'm a little different on is the fact that I still go back to kind of the hopeful side. There's parts that I'm obviously clearly there's parts that I'm down on, but what's happening on the border, Gonzalo and I talked about this earlier, kind of offline. It's been happening for so long, and again, it's one of those
it's been
problems
happening
that has been used as a political football, and no one tries to solve it. But generally speaking, I mean, we are, a country of 360 million, 370 million people, and there are people who are racist. There are people who are communist. There's all these ists that we could use about other people. But at the core of it, we do have a pretty diverse nation. And when you look around the world, we have a very diverse country. And generally speaking, we're good people. And I think that's something that it's so nice to hear, even though you've had struggles, talking about how great America is and how much you do love being here. I think we got to root out the bad, but I think there's a lot of good to build on. And, I met you, I think briefly after you got here, apparently. I didn't realize that, but you got here around 2015. I was in Boston in 2016. So you were still fresh to the country. And I mean, I never thought of you as like Gonzalo, that Venezuelan guy. That never came to mind. It was just like, oh, Gonzalo's cool. And he's funny because he went on this date, then,
And I partied like an American too.
Yes. Well, no, I think you partied like, from what I understand, a Venezuelan party's like, because Americans couldn't keep up with you. So
yeah.
Yeah. But I think in general, that's like, I think that's the beauty of this country is, we do have our problems, but I do feel like there's so much good, and I hope we can capitalize on that and start having these kind of conversations and start moving forward and trying to fix something. But thank you for being on the show. And that's what I want to ask you is, what's next for you? I mean, what is it that we could do to help Venezuela? Listeners could do? What is it that we could help interpersonal relationships? Solve all our problems with immigration and Venezuela in the next 30 to 40 seconds?
Well, I think first and foremost, try to listen more to the stories. There's a lot of journalists out there doing the job and talking about stuff that matters. And they're unmasking the propaganda, and they're putting very active efforts in doing better. Second, it's just a matter of find content that you can see more of the stories. Like I told you, that documentary, Once Upon a Time in Venezuela, it's heartbreaking, but it's very powerful because you really get to see how everything has happened in a very, like a microcosmos of it. And the other part, I think, in terms of what's next, I just think, keep doing this kind of stuff, because I think it's very important in this current world with all the news and the propaganda and people that are just out there to spread ill-minded information in a world that has a lot of very naive people. It's important that things like this happen, because it takes the power away from them. It goes back to what the information and journalism and the truth is, and more about the commercial news, that what it is right now. That's the importance of this kind of initiatives, and that's the importance of the freedom of press in countries like Venezuela, having the journalists that go there and do the research and come back with the truth. So I think keep doing stuff like this. I really enjoyed this conversation. I really support this initiative, and I hope you guys keep hashing out important stuff.
Oh, thanks.
That's our goal. And I will say, just to kind of wrap up here, we have some links up on the website already, the links to the documentary, some links to some of the other materials we read going into this. I encourage everyone to go to researchthenews.com and read up on what's actually happening. And I think we'll also too, I'm going to ask you for some journalists that are good journalists, that would be someone that's giving unbiased information. But I think one of the moments, and I'll just wrap up on a kind of a positive note that just, I think would hopefully bring people together. If you watch the documentary, we talked about this right before we went on air. One of my favorite parts in that movie was this little boy was on a boat and he was fishing with his sister, and he picked up a fish and cocked it. So he took the tail and kind of cocked it and started shooting. He went bang, 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 bang. And I just thought of every little boy that I grew up within the neighborhood, using our, airsoft guns. And it's just kind of a thing that boys do around the world. And the little girls were dressing up and having their pageants. And it was just this beautiful moment of these kids in this really terrible situation, just being kids. And it breaks your heart. And you also see joy in such a bad situation, and they're still finding ways to be happy. And I think that's where if we see those kind of things, hopefully people who are on the left that think Chavez and Maduro are amazing can start seeing that maybe there's some problems there. And people on the right that have used Venezuelans, any population, as pawns and only want to talk about the economic side of it can say, hey, there are real people being affected by these policies. It's not a point to just bring someone to a State of the Union and say, hey, look at me, I'm helping. And then absolutely nothing happens, but you scored some political points. So seeing those children, it was both heartbreaking and also to just heartwarming, seeing just little boys, little girls being kids. And I encourage everyone to watch those documentaries. And I thank you guys again, both for being on the show. Hopefully we'll have Gonzalo back again at some point, but check out the website. Feel free to share this podcast, and we'll be coming back with you next week for another episode of Research the News.